The morning Emma Rodriguez accidentally changed the course of galactic history started like any other Tuesday in New Geneva Colony. Her parents, both xenarchaeologists working on Mars, had enrolled her in what they thought was a standard interspecies exchange program. What they didn't know was that a single misplaced decimal in her aptitude scores had catapulted her from remedial algebra into the most prestigious graduate seminar in the Andromeda Educational Collective, standing before the towering crystalline spires of the collective's main campus. Emma felt like an ant approaching a cathedral. The buildings stretched impossibly high, their surfaces rippling with holographic displays of equations that made her head spin. Students floated past on gravity, platforms some humanoid, others resembling walking trees or sentient clouds of gas. A group of crystalline scholars chimed past her in harmonious tones that translated as heated debate about quantum ethics. "This doesn't look like middle school," Emma muttered, checking her schedule tablet for the 5th time. The device cheerfully confirmed her assignment. Advanced Galactic History, Professor Vex Thala, Amphitheater Prime. The amphitheater itself defied every law of architecture Emma knew. Seats arranged themselves in impossible spirals around a central speaking platform that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. 200 graduate students filled the space beings with tentacles, crystalline exoskeletons, and energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. Emma found an empty seat between a 6-armed hexapod scribbling notes in midair and a gelatinous scholar whose thoughts appeared as color patterns across its translucent surface. Professor Vex Thala emerged from what Emma could only describe as a fold in space itself, standing 12 feet tall with iridescent tentacles that moved like liquid lightning. She commanded instant silence simply by existing. Her voice, when she spoke, resonated at frequencies that seemed to bypass Emma's ears entirely and speak directly to her mind. Today we continue our examination of the Great Silence. The professor began, holographic star charts materializing around her. The final definitive disappearance of the architect civilization, occurring precisely 847,231 standard years ago, across 17 galaxy clusters simultaneously. Emma raised her hand. The entire amphitheater turned to stare at the tiny human child who had somehow materialized among them. Several students made sounds Emma's translator couldn't parse. Professor Vex Thala's tentacles froze mid-gesture. "Yes?" The professor managed. "I'm sorry, but I'm really confused about something. You keep saying they vanished mysteriously, but looking at the data patterns you're showing us, it seems pretty obvious they just evolved beyond physical form. Like this energy signature here?" Emma pointed at the hologram with a pencil she'd pulled from her backpack. "That's not extinction. That's transformation." The silence that followed was so complete Emma could hear her own heartbeat. Somewhere, in the back rows, a crystalline being actually cracked. "Child," Professor Vex Thala said with the careful tone one might use to address a live explosive, "the Council of Cosmic Wisdom definitively established. But did they actually prove it? Or did everyone just stop asking questions because the Council said so?" Emma interrupted, pulling out her battered notebook. "Because I was reading your assignment last night, which is really interesting, by the way, and I counted 17 major logical inconsistencies in the official theory. Also, why doesn't anyone talk about the quantum foam resonance patterns? They're still there, if you know how to look." What happened next would be discussed in academic circles for centuries to come. A 12-year-old human, armed with nothing more than curiosity and a willingness to question everything, began systematically dismantling 3 millennia of established galactic academia. Asterisk the 47 minutes that followed. Emma's first question would later be known as the Great Academic Earthquake of Stardate 4847.3. But in the moment, it felt to Emma like the most natural thing in the world asking why, until the answers made sense. "Let me show you what I mean." Emma said, standing up and walking toward the holographic display with the casual confidence only a 12-year-old could possess when surrounded by beings with advanced degrees from across the galaxy. Professor Vix Thalos, tentacles writhed in what Emma's crash course in alien body language had taught her was either extreme agitation or profound curiosity. Possibly both. The official theory says the architects were wiped out by some kind of cosmic catastrophe, right? Emma continued, gesturing at the star charts. But look at the distribution pattern. If it was a catastrophe like a galaxy-spanning plague or a stellar phenomenon, you'd expect to see epicenters, gradual spread patterns, maybe some populations that held out longer than others. She traced her finger through the hologram, and to everyone's amazement, the display responded to her touch, highlighting the data points she indicated. Instead, we see simultaneous disappearance across 17 galaxy clusters. Not gradual simultaneous. Down to the same cosmic hour. That's not extinction. That's coordination. A ripple of clicking, humming, and harmonic resonance filled the amphitheater as students began cross-referencing Emma's observations with their own data sets. The hexapod next to her was scribbling frantically with all 6 arms. The gelatinous scholar had turned a deep purple that Emma's translator interpreted as extreme intellectual excitement. Furthermore, Emma continued, warming to her topic, everyone keeps ignoring these energy signatures in the quantum foam. Your textbooks dismiss them as background radiation of unknown origin, but that's just lazy science. Unknown doesn't mean unknowable. She pulled out her tablet, a battered Earth-made device that looked primitive compared to the elegant technology surrounding her, and began projecting her own calculations. I spent yesterday afternoon well. What passes for afternoon when you're orbiting 3 different suns running these energy patterns through basic harmonic analysis? You know what they look like? Music. Complex, beautiful, multidimensional. Music that's still playing after almost 1,000,000 years. Professor Vexthalis' tentacles had gone completely still, which Emma was beginning to understand meant the alien was thinking very hard about something. Child, Emma. My name's Emma Rodriguez, and I'm 12 years old from New Geneva Colony, Mars Sector, Sol System. And I think your architects didn't disappear at all. I think they ascended. The word hung in the air, like a physical thing. Several students made sounds of distress. A crystalline scholar in the back rows began resonating at a frequency that made the amphitheater's walls hum in sympathy. Ascension theory was debunked by, Professor Vexthala began, by the Council of Cosmic Wisdom. Yeah, you mentioned that. But when, and based on what evidence? Emma pulled up another screen of calculations. Because I've been reading their original papers. They're in the public archives, by the way, which is super cool, and their rejection of ascension theory is based entirely on the assumption that consciousness can't exist independently of matter. She grinned with the kind of mischievous joy that had gotten her in trouble in every school she'd ever attended. But that assumption is wrong. We've known that for centuries. Even humans figured it out, and we're barely out of our own solar system. So if the council based their conclusions on faulty premises, she let the implication hang in the air. Professor Vexthala was now changing colors in a pattern Emma had never seen before. Around the amphitheater, graduate students were frantically accessing databases, cross-referencing Emma's claims, and making discoveries that were shaking the foundations of everything they thought they knew. The question, Emma continued cheerfully, isn't whether the architects are gone. It's whether they're still here, just in a form we haven't learned to perceive yet. And if they are? She gestured at the quantum foam energy readings. Maybe they've been trying to communicate with us this whole time, and we've been too busy accepting official answers to listen. The revelation that the great silence might not be silent at all spread through the Andromeda Educational Collective like wildfire through a paper forest. Within hours of Emma's impromptu lecture, 17 different departments had suspended their regular curricula to investigate her claims. The Department of Quantum Consciousness hadn't seen this much excitement since the discovery of the Zephyrian emotion crystals. 3 centuries earlier, Emma found herself at the center of an academic hurricane she'd never intended to create. Her simple question, but why, had apparently triggered what the faculty was calling a paradigm cascade event, which sounded much fancier than what Emma considered basic curiosity. "I don't understand why everyone's so upset," she told Dr. Corinth, the collective's dean of xenopedagogy, as they walked through the campus's meditation gardens. The gardens existed in a pocket dimension where the laws of physics were more suggestions than rules, allowing for some truly spectacular plant life. Emma was particularly fascinated by the singing roses, whose melodies changed based on the listener's emotional state. Dr. Corinth, a being who resembled a cross between a wise old tree and a theoretical mathematician, rustled his leaves thoughtfully. "Emma, in 3 hours you've managed to call into question foundations of knowledge that have stood for millennia. The Cosmic Council's theoretical framework underlies virtually every aspect of our understanding of galactic history, consciousness studies, and dimensional physics. But if it's wrong, isn't it better to know that?" Emma asked, stopping to examine a flower that appeared to be growing backward through time. "I mean, isn't the whole point of education to figure out what's actually true, not just to memorize what people used to think was true?" Before Dr. Corinth could answer, Professor Vexthyla materialized through the garden's quantum flux with 3 other faculty members in tow. Emma was getting better at reading the professor's tentacle language and could see she was in a state of controlled excitement. "Emma," Professor Vexthyla said without preamble, "we need your help. The energy signatures you identified in the quantum foam, we've been analyzing them using your harmonic approach, and we're detecting response patterns." "Response patterns?" Emma asked. "The music is changing based on our observations. It's reactive, adaptive, almost as if something's listening," Emma finished, her eyes widening. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Do you think they're actually there?" "The architects?" Dr. Silith, the collective's head of consciousness studies, stepped forward. She was a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline framework, and when she spoke, her words appeared as patterns of light. "We've assembled teams from every major department. If your theory is correct, we're on the verge of the greatest discovery in galactic history. But we need someone who can think outside established paradigms. Someone who hasn't spent centuries learning why certain questions shouldn't be asked," added Professor Zine Kalar from the Department of Impossible Physics. Emma looked around at the assembled faculty beings representing some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, all looking to a 12-year-old human for guidance. It should have been intimidating, but instead, she felt the familiar thrill of a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Okay," she said, pulling out her notebook, "but we're going to need to approach this completely differently. If the architects really did ascend to a higher dimensional state, then we can't study them using 3-dimensional thinking. We need to find a way to expand our perception." She paused, struck by a sudden thought. "Actually, has anyone tried just asking them? I mean, if they're listening to us analyze their energy signatures, maybe they're waiting for us to figure out how to have an actual conversation." The silence that followed was different from the shocked quiet of the amphitheater. This was the silence of minds racing toward possibilities that had never been considered. "The communication protocols," Professor Vexthyla whispered. "We've been studying the quantum foam as a phenomenon to be analyzed, not as a medium for interaction." Emma grinned. "So how do we say hello to a civilization that exists in pure consciousness, spread across multiple dimensions?" As it turned out, the answer would require rewriting several fundamental laws of physics, reorganizing the collective's entire research methodology, and teaching a 12-year-old human to speak in mathematics that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. But Emma Rodriguez had never met a challenge she didn't want to tackle with enthusiasm and an endless supply of questions. Asterisk. The newly established Architect Communication Project took over the collective's largest research facility within 48 hours. What had started as Emma's simple observation about energy patterns had evolved into the most ambitious interdisciplinary effort in galactic history. The facility hummed with activity as beings from hundreds of species worked around the clock to build what Emma had dubbed the universe's most complicated telephone. Emma stood before a construct that defied description. Part machine, part mathematical equation, part pure conceptual framework made manifest. Crystalline arrays interfaced with quantum probability clouds, while harmonic resonators translated emotional states into 11-dimensional mathematical structures. It looked like what might happen if music decided to become architecture. "I still can't believe this is working," she said to Professor Vexthala, who was simultaneously monitoring 17 different data streams while her tentacles performed calculations in mid-air. "Working might be an optimistic assessment," the professor replied, though Emma could detect excitement in her voice. "We're detecting increased coherence in the quantum phone patterns, but whether that represents successful communication or simply our equipment causing interference remains to be determined." Dr. Silith materialized beside them, her crystalline form pulsing with patterns of light that Emma was learning to interpret as complex emotions. "The dimensional resonance is stabilizing. Whatever's responding to our attempts at contact, it's definitely intelligent and definitely interested in communicating." Emma consulted her notebook, which now contained mathematical equations that would have baffled her a week ago, but somehow made perfect sense after 3 days of intensive tutoring by the galaxy's most advanced minds. "Okay, so we know something's listening, and we know it's trying to respond. But we're still thinking about this wrong," she said, chewing on her pencil, a habit that apparently fascinated her alien colleagues. "We keep trying to send messages to them, but what if they don't receive information the same way we do?" She walked over to the harmonic resonators, instruments that looked like frozen lightning and sounded like the mathematical concept of joy. "When I was little, my dad used to teach me about archaeology by having me imagine what it would be like to communicate with people from thousands of years ago. He said the trick wasn't just sending a message, but understanding how the receiver would interpret it based on their completely different worldview." Emma turned to face the assembled team of researchers. "So if the architects evolved beyond physical form, they probably don't experience reality the way we do. Time, space, individual consciousness, maybe those are just artifacts of having bodies." Professor Zen Kolar, whose species communicated through controlled gravitational waves, created a pattern that translated as intense curiosity. "You're suggesting we need to approach communication from their perspective rather than ours." "Exactly. Instead of trying to send them a message, what if we tried to become the kind of beings who could naturally communicate with them, even just temporarily?" The suggestion sent ripples of excitement and concern through the assembled researchers. Dr. Corinth rustled his leaves nervously. "Emma, what you're describing sounds dangerously close to attempted consciousness ascension. The risks are probably worth it if we're careful," Emma interrupted gently. "Besides, we wouldn't be trying to permanently ascend, just stretching our awareness enough to meet them partway." She pulled up a holographic display showing the quantum foam energy patterns they'd been tracking. "Look at this. The music isn't just random, it's responsive, but it's also educational. Like they're trying to teach us something. What if they've been trying to show us how to expand our consciousness safely?" Professor Vexthala's tentacles went very still. "The patterns do seem to follow a progressive complexity curve. Almost like ... double quotes, like a curriculum," Emma finished. They're not just trying to talk to us. They're trying to teach us how to talk to them. The implications hit the research team like a wave. If Emma was right, then the quantum foam signatures weren't just evidence of the architect's continued existence. They were an instruction manual for consciousness evolution, playing on repeat for nearly 1,000,000 years, waiting for someone curious enough to recognize them for what they were. So, Emma said, her eyes sparkling with the kind of mischievous excitement that had gotten her into this situation in the first place. Who wants to learn how to think in 11 dimensions?